Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to 22 Panels. My guest again today is the esteemed Howard Chaykin. Always a pleasure, Howard. Thank you for not being frustrated at my pointed emails and youthful. God, I have grandkids and I'm calling myself
That's,
youthful optimism.
that's really sad. And as I've said more than once, I blame my generation for this because it created this idea that we're entitled to be children until death.
Mm.
Right.
And, you know, it's just like, I mean, I'm looking at what I'm wearing right now. I'm wearing the same clothes I wore as a child. Just the cut is different because I'm
Yeah.
fat, and
Right.
you're on the same
Right.
boat. Look, I mean, before I signed that, I got an email from my daughter telling me that my grandson is coming down to spend a weekend with us before we go off to New York next week. And so and he's 16. So what the fuck am I doing? I mean, Jesus. That's the deal.
Before we jump into some of the stuff that you have coming up, I wanted to thank you immensely for turning me on to Stefan Frank. I've read all 5 volumes of Palomino yet now because he slipped me the first two before the last time the last two before the last time we talked. I've read all of his other stuff as well. He's been on the podcast 3 times. We get along really well. So thank you for that recommendation, even if it came right after telling me that there were no good new comics. You tell me about the good new comics.
Well, he is. I mean, again, it's you know, people mistake my dismissal of the first 10 years of my career as self-loathing, as self-deprecation. And actually, it's all based on narcissism because I
Right.
know how good I am, I know how good I became. But the good that I am, the good that I identify, has nothing to do with the standards imposed upon comic books by the general reader.
Right.
And Frank's work is good by my standards. It's
Yeah.
well written, it's well drawn, but it's not about shit that the average comic book reader gives a fuck about. The average comic book reader is obsessed with who their favorite Batman villain is, and that just doesn't interest me in the least. When I hear these comic book writers justify their existence by saying we're superheroes of the modern myth, we don't need modern myths. We really don't. I mean, it's myths are for the primitive and ignorant. We're just primitive. We're just ignorant, not primitive. We're very we're very sophisticated in our ignorance.
So two things there. One, I wanted to say that sentiment is precisely what I love about your work is the challenge to it and the way that you unabashedly and unforgivingly give the world, the way you see it and the way you want it to be done, and you let the readers follow you. Because that story of the guy who read American Flag #1 3 times and didn't get it, and you told him maybe read it a fourth. I did that with the first comic years, Satellite Sam. It was one of those, I read it and stuff went over my head, and I'm like, no, there's something in this I gotta keep. So I kept reading it 3 or 4 times until I got it and I loved it, and I've been a fan of your work since.
It's
And
very kind.
yeah, the second thing is that I would actually argue for the benefit of myth because it reminds us where we came from. And that's one of those things that I think is always going to be important to the human experience is um, both, our history and the potential for our future. And I think myth is a through line of that. The degree to which superheroes are modern myth is questionable, but myth at its base is something
I
that's
see,
better.
I see your point,
Yeah.
but I also find that there are too many people who are easily pandered to and easily patronized by
Hmm.
by by a creative franchise that
Yep.
that grants them a higher understanding of stuff that doesn't deserve a higher understanding. I mean, speak of American Flag. I wrote a brief piece in one of the early issues, and I was taken to task in a review by some ignorant cocksucker, uh, and not in a good way, for
A mediocre one.
for what I identified as my own form of patriotism,
Hmm.
and it was a perfect example of the kind of hatred of the Western hatred nihilism that informed so much of the 1960s until now. Um, I come from a very left-wing background, but that left-wing background defines itself as a very, very patriotic one.
Hmm.
it's that difference between patriotism and nationalism. And, so I accept certain realities of the past, certain fantastical notions of the past as necessary for the survival of the mental state. But I also recognize the fact that most of them are bullshit.
Yeah.
I mean, my tagline on the Hey Kids comics material was always that a lot of it didn't really happen, but it's still all true. And I think that goes to what you're saying, I think.
A little bit, yeah.
No one hung an editor out of a window. But I couldn't do a fictional history of the comic book business without identifying that as an element, because people believe it so strongly that it's become an uncomfortable truth. And it never happened.
And see, I thought that was the autobiographical part.
How do you mean?
I thought you were confessing all these years later that it was you, not somebody else.
I'm too much pussy to hang anybody out of a window. I mean, I'm a physical coward, and I have no problem admitting that. And I avoid physical encounters because I'm afraid of getting the shit kicked out of me.
Me too.
I've never won a fight.
Yeah.
So one of the reasons I became a mouth, and one of the reasons I started drawing was to talk my way out of and draw my way out of confrontation as a little kid. That's
okay. I like that.
In grammar school, because I've always been a smart ass and I've always walked into situations that I couldn't handle physically. So I was able to either talk my way out of it or draw filthy pictures to get my way out of it. And that's not a joke.
I believe it. That would be a valuable talent on most school playgrounds, I think. Your upcoming releases, the first is a Fantagraphics book that collects.
I know nothing.
You know nothing about it. Oh, you wouldn't
know. I'm not serious. I'm not in any way in the loop.
I believe it.
Let's hope you're looped in on the back end when the sales come through.
Look, I mean, Fantagraphics, the deal with the devil that Fantagraphics has made with Marvel makes me laugh every day. It really does. I find it fascinating and charming. I wrote an introduction to that book, which was just refused to be published by the powers that be at Disney and Marvel. Because I mean, when I'm hired to write an introduction for anything, my own work or someone else's, I deliver what I regard as an honest take on the material. When I wrote the introduction to the first volume of the Terry and the Pirates collection from the American Library of American Comics, I talked about the fact that I didn't understand in reading the earliest strips of Terry why everybody was so hot about this shit. It didn't strike me as particularly interesting. And then all of a sudden, 6 months into the run, it becomes good. Okay.
Right.
So the first word in that introduction is patience. And I was hired by Marvel for next to no money to write the introduction to the Shield omnibus of Steranko's work. And they were not happy with what I delivered. They ended up bowdlerizing the fuck out of it. If you're interested, I'll send you the original version. I'd be glad to.
I would love to see it.
And publishing it print without acknowledging that it was in there. They didn't mention my name in any way in the front or back. And they printed it on a type size that's comparable to the side effects that you see in medication. So kids we don't want to do it. And I stand by what I said there. And I find it amazing that these people would think that I would do anything but an honest appraisal of the material. Okay. And I wrote an introduction to this Fantagraphics thing, and Gary called me up and said they wouldn't even ask you to rewrite it. They hated it so much. And
that's the one that I want to see.
Well, what it says basically, I hate every other version of this character, but I'm okay with that.
I respect that.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I mean, one of the myths that Stan proposed that people tend to believe is that we're just a bunch of comic book loving guys, blah, blah, blah. And one of the things that I learned early on, because I worked for Gil Kane when I was 18, was how much those old guys hated each other. There were friends, there were certainly colleagues among them and friends, people they regarded with an high regard. I mean, for example, everybody loved Frank Giacoia. Everybody loved Frank Giacoia. But they all hated each other because they've been in competition as children, and they'd grown up expecting better and never finding any better. And this is where they were. Okay. And back in the DC coffee room in the early 70s, we made a pledge that we would never be that way. And of course we became that way. because we're old, we became old men, and the unifying factor, what made us friends in the beginning of those early relationships was our love of the form. But that is not enough to sustain a relationship any more than hot fucking is a way to sustain a marriage. And you just move along, and ultimately you maintain affections, you maintain relationships. There are people that I've been friends with for over half a century. There are people that I would literally love to read their obituary tomorrow morning. So that's just human nature. And there's an aversion on the part of comic book readers that we don't all get along. We don't all get along. And there are relationships that started badly that ended well. There are guys that I did not get along with in my 20s that I hold in very high esteem today. A lot of it is envy, jealousy, resentment. It's just, human nature.
So that's something that also speaks to me, because I feel like some of the material that I love the most these days, I started off with an aversion to, and I pushed through and I worked, and I found something in it. So I'm just curious if you'd be willing to share any of those people that you might have started out less than favorable of, but hold in high regard today, if that's a name.
Well, Kaluta and I got into a big fight in public at a Canadian show years ago, and but we were in our 20s. Who gives a shit? I love Michael's work. I love Michael personally. As I posted a photograph that was taken about 5 or 6 years ago when I was in New York, when we managed to get him out of his burrow for breakfast, and it was just a great. I've been trying to get Michael to get out on the convention circuit, because he'd be people would love to see him. And he looks great. And his work is just really bitching. It's fantastic stuff. He's still working like a son of a bitch.
Michael who?
Kaluta.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And I was always
the Shadow.
And Bill Sienkiewicz, he's more than the Shadow. Kaluta.
No, I said you guys both worked on the Shadow.
That's true.
Recently
That's true.
read both of your works on the Shadow, because we did the Shadow for our pulp book club recently.
You should reach out. To Michael is just a lovely human being, one of the best people in the world. He's really worth talking to. And Bill Sienkiewicz,
we'll have to see if I can find time.
I was so jealous of Sienkiewicz's work back in the day. We were like constantly at odds with each other. Now I have lunch with him every fucking month.
Nice.
I love this guy so much. We talk each other off ledges on a regular basis. But that's what happens when you either lifelong animus evolves, or you come to terms. And I recognize so much of it was on my side. Because of the work I do, and because of the way I present in public, people tend to assume that I'm difficult to work with on an editorial basis, and this is not true. One of the reasons why I was hired by Marvel in the early aughts to come to New York twice a year to do a boot camp for talent was that I have a clear and specific understanding of the relationship of talent to client. So that's that first day of those boot camps was me yelling at 5 young guys. They were all men, about managing their careers, about how to have a career, and what a career means, and what your relationship with editorial really is. Because most of these guys are asocial. They have no understanding of what it means to become a cog in corporate culture, whether you like it or not. And that also discuss the temporary nature of that relationship, because even though the audience isn't getting any younger, its tastes change and its tastes flag. And the relationship of talent to client is something that we learned early on that many young guys don't, because by dint of the fact they don't live in New York City, they don't have that abrasive, direct relationship with your editor. I was really lucky, that, and I came up at the time when you had to live in New York City. It was pre-FedEx, pre-digital. And our relationships were direct. and in my case in particular, Joe Orlando taught me how to be a guy in the business. There's a review in the TCG of the new the republished DC Style Guide, which identifies Orlando as a guy who really understood how to be a comic book man. Joe is one of the best people ever, and he was my rabbi at DC, specifically because Carmine hated me because of my relationship with Gil Kane, because the two of them hated each other as they were children.
Wow.
And I mean, I've told the story publicly about Gil after Frank Chacoya died, Gil having a real stroke of terror in his own mortality and going out on an amends tour, making up with people he'd been angry with and that he had no words with for years. And when I asked him how it was going, he said it was really good. He said, except for that fucking Carmine, he can go fuck himself. Which remains just it was fabulous. It really was. So I mean, we've, people are dying. My generation are dying, and whatever.
Well, I guess on that note, what's something that you wish you would see more of out of the younger generation of comic people?
Literacy,
Literacy. Okay.
visual literacy, narrative visual literacy. The direction the business has taken since the 1990s has been a collapse of narrative structure and a collapse of understanding of what the job is. I mean, I don't regard myself as an artist. I regard myself as a graphic designer. I regard myself as a craftsman. And I think that comics is at its core graphic design in the service of narrative. And the understanding of narrative and the understanding of pages and panels endowed with narrative value is something that has, to a certain extent, been diminished and vanished. When that second day of those boot camps consisted of an understanding of that, and the idea of the relationship between how you organize elements in a picture and how those pictures themselves become part of an organized elements on a page, is frequently a difficult thing for people to grasp. I think a lot of it is that the material, the talent pool that has come into the business since the 1990s is imbued almost entirely with the culture that's seen through the scrim and the filter of comic books and comic book related material. That the generation that preceded mine, I mean, there were two generations that precede mine. There's the originals, the golden age guys. Then there's that brief blip of guys born between 1938 and 40. Neil, Steranko, Roy, Tom Palmer, Archie Goodwin, guys like those, who really grew up reading pulps, reading mainstream fiction, and just reading and looking and seeing. And with a curiosity. I mean, one of the things that I so deeply respect Bill Sienkiewicz for is Sienkiewicz has an archaeologist's mind and an anthropologist's mind. He's digging and finding, where did this come from and why? Why does this work? How does Nikolai Fechin, how does Rene Grau function in this context? And that's just, that anthropology, that archaeology is really what it's about. Because I mean, the song, as the song says, everything old is new again. And you have a generation now, that the generation that followed the generation that came in after mine is almost exclusively influenced and indoctrinated into the realm of comic books. So it's all very trope based. And the irony right now is that since the early aughts, when the companies came to understand that they couldn't allow anything like the image explosion to happen to them again, they made the writer the alpha. And because basically writers in comics are transient figures, they're transitional figures. For the most part, very few writers in comics see comics as the end game in their experience. Rather, they regard comics as a means to create a name for themselves, build a reputation, learn their craft, and work and go on to either mainstream fiction, YA fiction, television, movies, video games. Whereas comic book artists are increasingly and intrinsically trope-based, that their skill sets don't really apply outside of the comic book realm, with obviously some exceptions. You very rarely see a client in the mainstream media hiring an actual comic book artist to do comic book style art. Rather, they hire an illustrator to create an impression of what comic books look like to them in their skewed memory, in their screen memories of their own childhoods.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the reasons I am deeply grateful and having learned how to be that trope-based guy is that my work I don't know how to ink. I don't know what inking means in the context of my work. I look at Dick Giordano, look at Wallace Wood. I can't do any of those things. And in retrospect, I'm really grateful that, I make drawings that are black and white that can reproduce. That's what I do. Comic book inking is something that escapes me. Simonson's the same. You look at that. Kaluta is the same. These are guys. Bill Sienkiewicz is the same. I mean, they're drawing in black and white. They're not inking in any facile trope based way.
Mm-hmm.
Sienkiewicz is also a fantastic inker.
Yeah, but he draws. That's
what I know he does. I know he does.
Yeah.
He there was a book released this week that he inked over Dennis Cowan, so it was in my head.
They're a great
they're an amazing team. They're an amazing team.
This is also reminding me of sorry, Chad, you go ahead.
I was going to say there are a couple of questions that the Fantagraphics book put in my mind that are less to do with the book and more to do with process. With Dominic Fortune, the stories collected are stories from way back when that you were drawing with somebody else writing, 40 years ago, and then your recent miniseries where you wrote and drew a character that you hadn't really done anything with in decades. So what's it like revisiting a character after so much time? But then the other thing is Phantom Eagle is one of a couple of books that recently you've done with other writers, which is something that you haven't done a lot since American Flag. Since American Flag, you've been more likely to write for another artist than to take on the art gig. So how has it changed through the years being the artist with a writer, and sub question, what's it like revisiting a character after so long?
That's a lot of questions.
Yeah, sorry.
I did.
Bill's having great questions too, so I feel like I need to get them all out at once.
Axel asked me about the Dominic Fortune stuff. I mean, the old Dominic Fortune stuff. Understand? I did all those plots.
I figured.
I was a sucker for the Marvel system. I mean, I did all the plotting. Someone else did the dialogue, and they got the money for writing, which is one of the reasons why I became a writer of my own work. Right. One of the people like working with me in those days was that I did that work. I made their jobs and lives easier. So in a lot of ways, I was basically a sucker for money. So, and in terms of the Max series, of the Dominic Fortune Max series, Axel approached me about this, and I had a great time doing it. I was really grateful. Axel had one of the lines, which I will not quote here, on his bulletin board behind him on his desk as his line of the month, which I thought was pretty funny. I wanted to do a sequel to it, which was about Fortune's experiences in the Spanish Civil War, which they passed on because nobody gave a shit about it. As for the Phantom Eagle stuff, there's a comic element to this. I signed on to do it because I like the source material. Also, Garth is one of the few guys in comics who, when he does a series, he writes the entire series. He's not writing it in a book at a time. So I was able to get an entire sense of the book. And I liked a lot of what I read. I was fired from a Wolverine arc and then rehired after the guy they hired to replace me fucked up and shit the bed. I went back on the Wolverine arc, did it, and they held up the Phantom Eagle for me. Not because of me, because they like being in business with Garth Ennis. Okay. My issue with that book, when I called Garth and I said, having written all 5 issues, I need you to send me a list of every single aircraft that appears in this 5-issue series. He did. I then purchased CGI models of every one of those planes and gave them to my CGI assistant and so he had those models. I then sent him rough angle shots because drawing biplanes is an extremely unrewarding experience. So we had wireframes of all the airplanes. We traced the wireframes, added details, and then that was how we did all the airplanes in the book, because they were a pain in the ass to do. So I was grateful that Garth did that. And I'm a research guy. I love doing reference and research stuff. It really appeals to me. So it was a job of work. I mean, I was grateful to have an opportunity to do something. I knew the book wouldn't sell worth a shit. But I got my page rate, and it was an opportunity to get paid to do something that was much more satisfying than a bunch of guys with lasers coming out of their fucking eyes. And that sort of stuff appeals to me. I mean, when a comic book fan asks me why I did this or that, and when I tell them it was because that was what was offered to me, there's this often gap of understanding. It's not like we control our experience. That powerlessness.
Yeah.
Years ago, I was between shows and I was pitching pilots. And I had this guy who had found himself in the movie business and the television business with no experience whatsoever. No idea. He's looking at my CV and my resume. He said, "Why did you do these jobs?" He says, "Because that's what was offered to me."
Right.
It's not like we control our environment in any real way.
Right.
And I'm a journeyman in regard to the Marvel super duper stuff and the space mutant laser monster science fiction stuff like this. I'm a journeyman in that regard. I'm not the go-to guy for that. I can do it, but I'm not as good at it as, say, Jim Starlin or Lionel Yu or any of these guys who do that sort of stuff on a regular basis. On the other hand, they can't do what I do. But what I do doesn't have any real profound appeal to an audience that likes their stuff better than mine.
I was actually asking slightly more about the personal experience though, because like
what is personal about this experience? I don't quite understand.
No, what I mean is now when you're doing art with another writer, whether it's Satellite Sam or Garth Ennis, I'm relatively certain it's because somebody requested you versus 30 years ago before you did so much on your own, where you were one of the guys that they looked to when they needed so has that changed the work experience at all, or is it just the
Fraction has often described Satellite Sam as Howard Chaykin fan fiction. And I don't know whether Garth asked for me on Phantom Eagle. I have no idea. I just don't know. I can't say.
Right.
I aged out of Marvel and DC within a couple of months of each other back in like 2012. I don't hear from them. I don't solicit work. I just don't have any particular interest in convincing someone to hire me on a job because it's counterintuitive. And the last thing I pitched at DC was a modern version of Black Hawk, which got no air at all. And I'm done. I'm finished with that shit. So I don't know. I really don't know. I mean, I have a relationship with Matt. I have a relationship with Garth, but not a daily chat relationship.
Right.
I mean, the most recent job that I just did a job for the Department of Education of New York City in partnership with the Tenement Museum,
Okay.
which Paul Levitz wrote. Paul and I have never worked together.
Okay.
And I did the artwork for this, and it was again, when I approach a job like this, I'm reminded all the time that most comic book readers don't really have an actual understanding of what writing in comics means. Writing in comics is a visual experience, and my job as a comic book artist, craftsperson, is to translate literary ideas into visual images with narrative value. In the case of Satellite Sam, I would say out of the 15 issues, there's maybe 25 pages that reflect exactly as Matt wrote that page in terms of layout. I approach a comic book script as a template. My job is to make certain that I visually tell the story that the writer has given me, but not particularly and especially and specifically in the way that he has asked me to tell it. Just bottom line, I'm not a tool, and the same is true of the Phantom Eagle. Although the Phantom Eagle skews a bit closer to what Garth wrote than Satellite Sam does. So I have a general approach to templating. I mean, my theory of comics is that space represents time. And right now, if you look across at my drawing table over there, I've got 24 index cards, which represent the 24 pages, the first issue of a 3-issue series that I'm writing right now for someone else to draw. I have no idea who, featuring a well-known and well-respected, pulp character. I'm not sure I'm supposed to talk about it, so I won't.
That's fine.
But and again, what the job of those cards is to tell me what I need to fill, where space needs to be, and an enormous number of those cards end with the letters TBD, because I have no idea what's on those pages, but I know those pages must be. I must find, frankly, this morning, I've been thinking about what has to be elaborated, what needs to be made bigger, what needs to be shown more, things like that. So that's how I approach writing. And it's very much the way I approach drawing. There's a holistic relationship between picture making and narrative and writing narrative. I've just taken on the assignment of writing my first piece of prose ever, and I have no fucking idea what to do with it. I'm shitting my. I'm really brain dead. I have no clue. I know what the story is, but I'm not sure I have any skill set in how to tell it. I can write a screenplay, I can write a teleplay, but I don't know if I can do this. I don't know. We'll find out.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd be. That is an exciting prospect to hear your first prose story written, at this point in your career. I'd be very curious to see how that turns out, how it ends up, but it's one of those things that, I feel really, really inclined to point you towards the a college professor of mine that you remind me of, Joe Amato, who is another guy from New York. He was an engineer before he went back to school to become a poet. I read one book of his called Big Man with a Shovel that is a modernization of the John Henry Irons myth, and it's written experimentally, minimalistically, no quotes around dialogue tags. It's very natural. I'd hope you get something out of it. I think it's available on Kindle for like $1.
Okay.
Yeah, but yeah, I'd love to see the two of you in a room chatting each other up.
Well, I've been sitting in development on an atheist comic book, with 3 pieces that to offend and appall the three great religions of the world, and I'm trying to figure out which one of those 3 pieces will end up as the prose piece.
Oh, okay, interesting.
So I've got plots in general in specific. Each one is generally plotted. One is epistolary. One is in well, they're just strange. My relationship with the supernatural stuff is on record. I'm not a fan.
Yeah.
Well, that's definitely something that I'd be curious of, because I remember when I was looking at your body of work for a second, I thought, okay, you're a guy who's done a lot of pulp. You've done some sci-fi. I know with like Times Squared, and the superhero stuff is probably closer to sci-fi than not. I was a little surprised to see that you'd drawn something Moorcock related that was sword and sorcery fantasy.
Well, that was my thing in the early 70s. I was a
Okay.
huge. We were all sword and sorcery guys. I mean, all of us. I mean, I was my second Soul on the Road to Damascus moment was in October the 25th, 1963, when I read A Fighting Man of Mars by Edgar Rice Burroughs. It was a transformative experience. I said, where the fuck has this been all my life? And that led right to, to the Conan work, to reading everything Burroughs wrote, all the imitated Otis Adelbert Klein, L. Sprague de Camp, Lynn Carter, all the Robert E. Howard work, Moorcock, Fritz Leiber. I mean, we all read Sword and Sorcery stuff. When we met in the coffee room at DC Comics, all of us had common ground and common language. I mean, it was my common ground with Gil Kane. Gil had read the Conan stories in their Weird Tales original printings. So, all of us grew up reading that stuff. And it wasn't until Archie Goodman started wooing me away from sword and sorcery and fantasy and science fiction into reading crime fiction that everything changed for me. Jeffrey O'Brien, the critic and poet, in his book Hard-Boiled America, I think it was Jeffrey O'Brien, now I'm embarrassed, he said that crime fiction is as fantastical as science fiction, but it remains based on absurd reality. And that absurd reality is just an absolute.
It is Jeffrey O'Brien.
Okay. Thank you.
That's a great quote, because I feel like there's something special in noir and crime stuff that it really does. It has that feel of myth and of larger than life times, but still, like you said, ground in modern times, ground in reality.
My two favorite current noir films are Emily the Criminal and Lake George.
Okay. I haven't seen either of those.
Oh, they're fucking amazing. Emily the Criminal is produced and stars Aubrey Plaza.
Oh, that sounds great. I've heard of that. I haven't seen it. Okay.
It's just great.
Okay.
The last 5 minutes, and the other one is called Lake George. It's mostly a two-hander with Carrie Coons and Shea Wiggum.
I love Carrie Coon.
You should love Shea Wiggum too.
Okay. I don't recognize the name, but I'm sure they'll be great.
You don't know Shea Wiggum?
No.
Shea Wiggum played Steve Buscemi's brother on Boardwalk Empire. He plays Jim Bridger on American Primeval.
Okay.
He's one of the greatest living character actors. He's frequently the best thing in anything he does, and he can do anything.
Nice.
And in this particular case, he's up against Carrie Coons, who's also in the same boat. Yeah. The two of them can face to face up, and also Glenn Fleshler is in it as well as his Max Casella. And it's a phenomenal little tiny movie that's really great. And Emily the Criminal will knock the shit out of you. It's so good. Oh, yeah. There's a scene in Emily the Criminal between Aubrey Plaza and Gina Gershon that is almost the entire movie. That is just knock you out. Great picture.
Heck yeah. I always on the lookout. Always on the lookout for good movies. I joke that
they're both. I mean, I think they're both available on streaming services. That I think I've seen both in theaters. So.
Emily the Criminal is on Netflix, and Lake George is on Hulu.
There we go. All right.
You'll thank.
Of course, I'm already thinking. Honestly,
I am too.
Yeah, that kind of almost segues to another one of my favorite anecdotes that I've heard from you is that you discovered J.H. Williams in comics, and he's one of my favorites, and he signed my copy of Son of Superman that you wrote for him. That was a great one.
Jim is just an amazing talent.
Oh yeah.
And I couldn't believe he was walking around with that much skill set and not working mainstream when I met him. I mean, I think it was like at a WonderCon or something like that. One of those small Northern California shows, maybe Sacramento. I don't recall.
Mm-hmm.
It's been too long, and I'm fucking old.
Oh yeah.
Also coming up, you have the hardcover edition of The Complete Black Kiss.
I do.
You do. August 15th, I think. Is what the Image website says.
We're assuming it was going to be out July 9th.
13th.
But there's shipping problems.
August 13th.
I mean, it's
right.
The ship is taking sweet fucking time,
Well, and
I've got a copy behind me. Okay. Yeah, it's disgusting. I mean, the book, it's everything. It's 400 some odd pages. It's immense. It's got a new 28-page story plus back matter you've never seen. So it says a lot of added value. And I convinced him to drop the price by $10 because I felt that it was better to sell more than less. So yeah, I at this point they haven't committed to the data publishing. They're still wild because we're at the mercy of the trade winds, so to speak.
Yeah. Well, and the distribution was completely screwed up this year, that sort of thing.
It has been a shit fest.
Yes.
In a technical sense.
But I was pleased to see that back in print.
And we're working right now. We're
my favorite.
It's this guy. You should be ashamed of yourself. We're working on the American Flag Omnibus, which is over 1,000 pages. And what I'm waiting for my editor's notes on my breakdown of the news story for that.
So is that going to actually collect all of it, or
everything?
Okay, that excites me because
like I say, it's going to be 1,000+ pages.
Yeah.
So, and my editor, the guy who edits my stuff, I don't own him. The guy who edits my stuff is a master at book mapping, and he's built the map, and pagination, just structural pagination, and he said I need a 12 to 16-page story, so I'm doing a 16-page story, which is called alternately Indoctrination or 7 False Flags. So it'll be a returning to the character. I've done a number of short pieces. This is another one, and we'll see what happens.
Now, if I recall correctly, there were some in there that were done by other people. Will this collect all of the character or just all of your stuff? I don't recall which.
Some yes, some no. I don't recall which. I really don't remember.
Fine.
One of the reasons I'm a great believer in having an editor.
Right.
And I mean, my relationship with him is, I've known this guy for many years.
You can give a shout out to your editor. I'm all for that.
I'm not going to name it. What the hell with him?
I'm a great belief in having an editor. To hell with him.
Well, when I delivered I sent 12 comps for the covers for the Black Kids 2-piece to Image in 2000, whatever it was, and they asked me why I was sending them, and I said, we don't care what you do, and I said I need editorial oversight, and there's no editorial oversight at Image.
Right.
So I asked this guy to be interested in doing it. So, and he gets to act out his control issues in relationship to me. It's good.
There you go. Cool. All right. I want to stick to our time frame. So I'm going to jump to my favorite final question. Tell me something you love. Preferably comic, but we don't have rules. Preferably storytelling, but again, we don't really have rules. But something that you love that not enough people around you also have experienced, and you would like more people to talk about it with.
Well, I've told you about those 2 movies.
Yep.
Which are related. I just finished watching Duster on HBO Max, and it is the most comic book show on television since Banshee. I was a huge fan of Banshee. The first 3 of the 4 seasons. The 4th season became problematic because they lost their tax credits where they were working and they had to move. But Banshee is the best comic book show that's ever been done that wasn't a comic book. And anecdotally, when my dear pal Mike Stratford was watching the first couple of episodes of The Boys, which I had not yet seen, I asked him how Anthony Starr was, and it was like, what? The guy who plays Homelander plays the lead on Banshee, and he's completely unrecognizable. He's completely unrecognizable. I came to understand that his performance on Banshee, which I at first thought was the limitations of an actor, where it was an affectless choice, which I found really fascinating. Because off camera, Starr comes off as the guy who was like your favorite Spanish teacher. And Duster is very much a comic book show done without a comic book franchise. I'm not a huge fan of J.J. Abrams stuff, although he did write 2 screenplays in his early career, which both got made into movies that didn't interest me at all. But the screenplays themselves were easily the best crafted screenplays I've ever read in my life. That would be Regarding Henry, and the screenplay originally titled The Rest of Daniel, which was made as Forever Young. you get a chance to read the rest of Daniel or regarding Henry, they are masterful as examples of screenwriting. I literally cried like a baby for the last 30 pages of the rest of Daniel. Knocked the shit out of me. And Duster is a collaboration between Abrams and someone named Latoya Morgan, I think her name is. It is fantastic. It's an absolute run, jump, ass kick of an action show. There's even there's an acknowledgement to Bullet in the middle of it because it's all about cars, and it's got one of the greatest title sequences I've ever seen because it basically acknowledges the existence of Hot Wheels and slot car racing. That's a pisser. It's just an absolute pisser. And in terms of comics, we talked about earlier about Palomino by Stephen Funk, which I'm very fond of. And I don't in comics. I mean, right now, I mean, the comics that I'm looking at, I'm rereading a lot of my ECs. I'm looking at a lot of the Ray Bradbury stuff. I had a great time visiting the Kirby exhibition at the museum.
The Bradbury EC collection was fantastic.
It's pretty
Put
swell.
together the Home to Stay. Yeah.
Oh, well, for me, it's that Million Year Picnic. It's that John Steinbeck piece. Which is so still and so melancholy. People are always surprised when I talk about how much I love John Severin's work. I adore the work. I mean, he was a huge influence on me. I mean, the work that he did for Harvey on the war books just staggers the shit. It's astonishing. There's talk about a guy who was born to he would have been a great guy to do the Flashman stories. Just imagine that work. So I love that work. I mean, I love Alex Toth. I love Wallace Wood. I love Gil Kane, although I draw nothing like Gil. I started out my career thinking I wanted to be Gil Kane when I grew up. And I love John Severin and Johnny Craig, and all those guys, those old men. And I like a lot of stuff. I hate a lot of stuff too, but I like a lot of stuff.
I know you do. Howard, thank you so much.
New album.
What?
Van Morrison's new album is an absolute ass kicker. It's him. It's as if they found stuff lying in a vault since the mid 1980s. He's in great voice. The orchestrations are amazing. It's a phenomenal record. It just dropped last week. It's great. Just fucking great.
Yeah.
So
let's see. That's a heck of a list. So again, thank you so much, Howard. It's always a pleasure. I look forward to seeing whatever comes next.
I mean, it's a great way to start America's birthday.
Yep. Yeah. And now I feel like I'm gonna go read some American Flag for America's birthday too, because you put it in my head.
Well, patriotism, not nationalism. That's all.
It's important.
Exactly. So for Howard Chaykin, this has been 22 Panels, and we will see you after the next page.